Okay, good afternoon, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this NAV Skills webinar. Today we are going to talk about job queues. I'm very happy to have Gino and Cynthia with me. I'm going to have you figure out which one is who yourself based on their LinkedIn profile pictures. Before I give the floor to them, a couple of housekeeping rules. Webinars are recorded. You can always find them on YouTube afterwards. But if you want to watch which webinars are new, you can actually go to the NAV Skills website or subscribe to our newsletter, and then you will be notified up front. If you have questions, please use the GoToWebinar questions window. I will be watching the questions window, and if I think it's really important, I will interrupt, and otherwise we will keep the questions to the end of the webinar. We'll make sure that we have plenty of time to answer them. And of course, thanks for Liberty Growth Software for sponsoring these webinars by allowing us to use their GoToWebinar account. So there's one upcoming webinar which is practically scheduled and you can register to. On Tuesday, December 19th, we'll have a webinar with Jakub, Tobias, and Freddy, and they will show practical examples of using Docker in real life. So with that, I'm going to change presenter, and I'm going to give Gino and Cynthia the floor.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it, and we're happy to be here sharing this information. What I want to let everybody know is that Job Queues to the Rescue is actually an encore presentation of the session that we presented at Summit NAVUG 2017 in Nashville, Tennessee. And as Mark had mentioned, Gino and I are presenting today. And I need to share with you a little bit of background here. When Mark Rhodes asked me to present a second session at Summit and suggested it be job queues, I was a bit concerned. Yeah, I had knowledge from managing and supporting projects where job queue was used, but I wasn't the one actually doing the work. So I wasn't quite sure what to do, and immediately asking Gino came to mind because he's one of our customers who really has jumped in and used job queues. So when I asked Gino, he said, absolutely. He jumped at the chance and he just ran with it. So the session we're presenting today is pretty much the result of his hard work. Now, I want you to be kind because Gino is still relatively new at job queues and at presenting. So Summit was his first time ever presenting, and not until their upgrade to NAV 2016 did he actually use job queues, and especially the way they're using it today. He has completely embraced the use of them, and he's still learning what can be done and how to do it with job queues. In fact, we were asked to do an encore session, a best of at Summit, and we had an opportunity to have some NAV MVPs in the room, and with the interaction at that session, we actually learned quite a bit about job queues that we didn't already know. So with that, Gino, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to say thank you for the introduction, Cynthia, and I'm very happy to be able to be speaking to you today about job queues. My name's Gino Pack. I'm Director of Information Systems at an optical manufacturing and distribution company based out of the west suburbs of Chicago, and I am a NAVUG chapter co-leader and member, and obviously a first-time speaker. So I'm a little nervous, but I'm really happy to be here to be talking to all of you today. A little bit about my history with NAV. I started using NAV about 8 years ago. We started on NAV 3.7, I believe, upgraded to NAV 2009 Classic Client, and this past May we've upgraded to NAV 2016. And it's when we upgraded to NAV 2016 that I really started embracing the job queue and really was able to see how much of a positive impact it had on our business, and I'm really honestly happy to share that positive experience with all of you today.
Thank you, Gino. One of the things that I want everybody to keep in mind is that the version that we're using in our illustrations is NAV 2016. So when we say what version of NAV is your company running, keep in mind that if it's anything You know, prior to NAV 2013, what we're talking about didn't really exist. But also be aware that from NAV 2017 forward, there are changes to setup and how it works underneath, but the basic use and premise that we're going to be discussing today still applies. Now, when it comes to the NAV 2017 and forward differences, there will be a section where Mark will be stepping in and helping us review those differences and reasons for those differences, and that'll be later in the presentation. So if you're on one of these versions or you're upgrading, what we share today will hopefully arm you with what you need to do to get started or use job queues more effectively. And finally, I don't care if you're the NAV administrator and that's your official title, or if you're an end user that's been assigned these responsibilities in addition to your accounting or operations or whatever you do in NAV, this presentation should have something for you. So, our session objectives. Again, upon completing the session, you should have a good understanding of how you can automate routine reports or important tasks so that you don't have to do them manually. We'll also help you learn how to schedule background processes to automatically post and send or receive data between NAV and other sources. And then finally, again, we hope that when you leave this session today, you'll have at least one way you can use the job queue, either in a pinch or ad hoc, or by scheduling routines to improve work efficiency. So, are you the job queue? Well, let's see how we can change that. So first, let's figure out what it is that the job queue does. And again, keep in mind, our hope is that as we go through this, you've taken a note and you have something you can take back. So let's just go ahead and get started. So how do we set up the job queue? Well, first of all, again, in summary, job queue, we can run reports and we can execute code units. Now, the neat thing about this is we can do this in a combination, and we can say, okay, the first thing I need to do is execute a code unit, and then after I execute that code unit, I want to run a verification report. So we actually get to say what order things happen in. And we can schedule those so that this runs in the background. If I need something to be available to me every Monday morning, I can schedule something for the weekend. If I need it to be available every day, I can schedule it for every night. If I need something to be done monthly, for example, I want to see a balance sheet and an income statement from every one of my 80 entities emailed to the different accounting resources that are available or supposed to be reviewing that, I can do that. I can say which computer or which service is utilized, or I can let NAV do that. And again, there's some differences as we move forward in versions with that. But the other thing that I can do is I can do all of this where I can use the job queue and I can schedule it, but we can also teach users how to do this. So all of a sudden, I have a need for a report tomorrow morning, and it's one of those reports that takes forever to run. When I leave my desk at the day, I can hit something so that when I come in the morning, that report is there for me. So if we look at this and I say, okay, I kind of referred a lot to reports. Well, it's for way more than reports. So what I did prior to Summit was I said, you know what, there's this great resource of how people use NAV, and it's called NAVUG Forum. And so I went out to the general forum and I just queried job queue. And I'll tell you what, this is some of what some of the users are doing. They're emailing vendors, they're running adjust cost item entries, they're doing imports, they're doing exports, they're calculating pricing, they're running batch posts, they're doing SQL store procedures. Oh my gosh, query it, see what other people are doing, get ideas of what you can do yourself. Okay? Now, some of this may apply and some of it may not, but no matter what, it's just a matter of getting the job queue set up. So what you do is you set up and you activate the job queue, and then you just go and you specify the NAV settings and you get, and it starts running. And I need to unmute Gino.
So this is where I'm going to go ahead and step in, Cynthia, because it just takes, specifically with the NAV settings, and this is one of the biggest things in 2016 that you, 2016 and earlier that you need to really think about is what type of business logic are you going to be running with the job queue? How do you want to set up the background in order to run your processes efficiently and without without error. So, you know, what's first? We all know the NAV three-tier environment. The first step in setting up the job queue, I think, goes a little into more technical detail. We need to decide the method in which we want to set up the job queue. Over here's the example on the screen of the NAV three-tier environment, and there's two common platforms of how you can run the job queue. You can utilize your main client tier, so all the same service tier that all your clients connect to, either physically or via the service, or you can utilize a dedicated NAS service or the NAV application server, and that, like I said, can also be just another NAS service on the same physical environment that your clients are connecting to, or it can be another service that is on a separate machine to utilize those resources. And I'll go in a little bit here to the benefits of doing it that way. So what is the NAS? The NAV application server is a faceless client, and it executes business logic without user interface or interaction. It can run code, it can run reports, it can do anything the full client can do process-wise. It just doesn't have a user interface, which means it's all done in the background on the server. Now the question is that you have to think of first is, to NAS or not to NAS? You want to go ahead and examine your business processes. Do you want to put it on the same server as the dynamic service tier? Or do you want to put it on a dedicated physical computer with its own resources and its own service? Now the advantages of using the dedicated environment, there's two big ones that I've noticed when I set it up, is you got the efficiency and convenience, okay? You have the ability to restart the server without disrupting clients. If you want to have fun with your team, just go and shut off the NAV, the client service tier, when you need to restart the job queue. I can almost guarantee you're going to have a bunch of people yelling in the office at the same exact time. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I would immediately put the NAS on its own service itself. Even if it's running on the same exact physical environment that your client service tier is running on, at least you've separated them out so you can restart the NAS service as you need to. You can also run different types of job queues on different NAS service tiers. So if you have some really performance-heavy reports or processes that you're running, you can build a separate environment and run those heavy processes on that separate environment while still running another job queue or NAS service on the same environment as your client for lightweight reports or lightweight processes or scheduled reports that your users may do. And the biggest one is increased performance. You'll see that your clients just run better. The NAS service runs better if it's on its own dedicated environment. But like I said, I understand that some people just don't have the budget to be able to creating a separate environment. So at the minimum, you really should keep your NAS service tier separate from your client service tier. Now we can go ahead and get into actually setting up the job queue in the NAV client itself. Now, the way it's set up in the NAV 2016 client is a little out of order in my opinion, at least when I was setting it up. So the order that I set up my job queues are in, I start off with category filters, then I move on to the job queues, then I go ahead and reboot the server tier so I could start the job queue, and then I go ahead and create my job queue entries. And I'm going to go through that really quickly just to give you sort of a run through of how I set up my job queue. I'm going to go ahead and start off with category filters. Here's an example of the category filters I use at my company, and I use them really to filter out jobs. Okay, there are some changes in NAV 2017 on how this works, and Mark will get into that in a little bit. But I really use the job category list to filter out my jobs. As you can see, I have some imports and exports that go to certain areas. I have my background post, and I have some various reports that are used as well. The second is setting up your job queue. So here's a list of my job queues that I have, and you can set up as many job queues as you want depending on the type of process or batch jobs or code units that you want to run. And there's two different ways that you can set up the job queue. You can set it up to start from just the nav application server instance, and then you can also choose to set it up from the actual client where it just runs from whatever client or whatever user is connected to that actual client. To start off setting up a job queue, in the ribbon you'll go ahead and select New. The job queue card will go ahead and pop up, and you'll start off by filling in the items like the code, description. You'll go ahead and select your job queue category filter. Now this is where I mentioned that I do things a little out of order. I set up the job queue category filters first, because when you set up a job queue, you'll select a category filter if you're going to apply one. You'll go ahead and decide your NAS settings, so you can choose to start it automatically from the NAS environment if you choose to. If not, you can go ahead and start it from the ribbon on the job queue card. If you do decide to start it automatically from the NAS, you will have to reboot your NAS service tier in order for the job queue to start. Now the biggest advantage to starting it from the NAS is if the server were to ever restart for any reason, like the physical server or your nav server were to restart for any reason, the NAS should automatically turn the job queue back on so your jobs can continue running from where they left off. If you don't start it automatically from the NAS, you have to manually go in and start the job queue via the ribbon on the job queue card. And then you want to go ahead and you can go ahead and select whether you want to start it on a NAS computer. So if you select a server from the service instance list, so you'll hit the little arrow next to the drop down next to start on this NAS computer or start on this NAS instance. Your server instance list will pop up, and you can go ahead and select either the service name or the server computer name that you want to run it from. Now if you select just start on this NAS computer, it's going to go ahead and connect to that server, and then it's going to find an available NAS, and it's going to run the job queue from one of those available NAS server instances. Now start on this NAS instance, that'll go ahead and start this job queue on only that instance and won't go over to another one. And then you can go ahead and start your job queue once you have it configured. You can start it from the job queue ribbon, and this is only for if you deselect the start from NAS option. So if you elected to not start your job queue from the NAS, you would start it from the ribbon on the job queue list page. Or if you'd rather start it from the NAS, you can go ahead and reboot the server tier, and then your job queue will automatically start running. And number 4, you can go ahead and set up your job queue entries. Whoops, sorry, went ahead. So you'll go ahead and fill in these different options here. Select your object type to run. So from here, you can run a report or a code unit. If you want to run objects like XML ports, you will need to create a code unit in order to run XML ports via the job queue. And I'll show you, that's a little bit more advanced. I'll show you that towards the end of the presentation. But you can do a lot of cool things by utilizing code units in the job queue. You'll select your object ID that you want to run, description. You'll set your parameter string, so if you're using a code unit and you're running different types of processes within one code unit, you can define a parameter that'll narrow down that code unit to the specific code that you want to run or XML port you want to run, for instance. Your timeout settings, the number of times you want the item, the entry to run. Your earliest start date time, so this is the earliest that you want this process to run, and the expiration date time. So if you set that and this entry goes past the expiration date time, it won't run. It'll actually give you a warning saying that this entry has expired. And that's for time-sensitive reports. So if you're running an AR report or a trial balance or something that needs to be run by a specific date, otherwise the data on it just isn't valid anymore, you can go ahead and set your expiration date and time as well. And then you can go ahead and set the priority as well. Underneath the report parameters on the job queue entry card, you can go ahead and select the report request page options, and that'll go ahead and bring up the report options for the report you selected to run. You can select the output type. The output type will give you things like PDF, Word, Excel, print. If you elect to print, you can go ahead and select a printer name as well. And then under the reoccurrence, you can go ahead and select how often you want this report to run. Do you want it run every day of the week? Do you want it run one day of the week? What time do you want it to start? And then how many times you want it to run. So if you have a reoccurring job that you want to run, you can set it to run every 5 minutes or every minute per se. And then once you have your job queue entry set up, you can go ahead and set the status to ready, and that'll indicate to the nav environment that this job queue is ready to go at the start time that you've selected. Alrighty, so let's take a moment, take a deep breath, because we're going to go ahead and jump into the actual fun stuff now, because now that your job queue is running, we can go ahead and show you what the job queue can actually do for your business. Let's start off with some basics. We're going to go ahead and start off by discussing scheduling reports via the nav client. Okay, you can set future dates, so you can specify the day of the week and the time you want the report to run. This is really good for targeting long-running reports, such as your AR report or your AP report. And then you can schedule them to run so it's not tying up your nav client and so it's not tying up your nav client, and you continue on with your daily work while the report is running in the background. Or you can go ahead and schedule the report to run overnight, and then you come in the morning and the report will be ready for you when you walk in. And then you can eliminate redundant daily processes. So processes that you do once a week or more than once a week that are pretty simple to give to nav to do. Let nav assist you by using the job queue and scheduling those reports via that. So scheduling reports really is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is select your report. I'm going to select a report that we all love near and dear to our hearts, and I know that this is a fun report whenever I bring it up to my staff, is the Aged Accounts Receivable report. Okay. The first thing you want to go ahead and do is select the report that you want to go ahead and run. As you can see, I selected the accounts receivable report, or the aging report, and you can go ahead and set your parameters for the report in here. You can set your age of, enter any filters that you may want, and then what you'll do, instead of hitting print or preview, you're going to hit the little arrow next to print, and it's going to bring up these several options. Okay, so you can either print it, PDF, Word, but this time, because we're going to be using the job queue, we're going to go ahead and select schedule. And when you hit schedule, the scheduling window is going to go ahead and pop up. From there, you'll see that the report you selected is there. You can set a custom description if you want. So if you're running it for just a specific account or a specific sales rep group or a customer group, you can go ahead and put that there so you know that the results of this report, or so you can remind yourself the results of this report. Go ahead and select your output type. You can output to Word, Excel, PDF. You can print it. So if you select print, you'll go ahead and put the printer name in the printer selection box. And then you'll go ahead and select the start time or the time you want the report to run. Oh, there you go. So I'm skipping a slide here. I'm sorry. And then you can select your expiration date and time. So if you want the aged accounts receivable not run past Friday, you can go ahead and set the expiration date to Friday, so this report doesn't run because the data in it may be useless by that point. And then once you schedule it, you can go ahead and let the job take over. But I am warning you, don't let your boss see you doing this. Continue to use the nav client for whatever you do for your other roles and tasks, because at this point the job queue is going to take over and run the report for you. Now, I want to jump into another topic. This one's fairly new to me, because my company personally does not use background posting, but me doing a session on the job queue, I thought it was very, very important that we talk about it, because it really could save a lot of time when posting documents and get rid of dreadful errors as the one that's on the screen. I'm pretty sure all of us have seen the record was locked error by another user. This one was a frequent one for us, but utilizing the job queue and different processes and stuff like that, and definitely by using background post, you can really minimize that error. So what is background post? What it does is it puts your postings in a queue. Okay, so when two people post at the same exact time, what it's going to do is it's going to put them in a straight line, similar to my image right here. Think of it as if you were a class is ending, everyone is getting up to walk out of a single door. Okay, people are going to probably bounce into each other as they're walking out of the door. That's similar to what happens if you're not using background post. When two people try and post at the same time, they may run into each other when it's trying to post to customer ledger or the GL or something like that. So what background post does is it takes those requests and it puts it as if everyone were to line up and walk out the door single file. So John and Susie both hit print and post at the same exact time. What it does is it'll take one of them first, wait for it to finish, and then the job queue will automatically post the next document as well.
And the big, Gino, I want to add a big part of that is once they hit post or post and send or whatever it is they're doing, their screen is not sitting on that document anymore. They're not waiting for the queue to process for them. Their screen is cleared and they can now move on to the next nav activity. And I want to make sure that's clear. So that queue is behind the scenes. That's why it's called background post.
Yep, and that's a great and very, very important point, Cynthia. Thank you. So continuing with the background post, with that in mind, you can do it with all types of sales and purchase documents, orders, return orders, credit memos, invoices. But there is also a little bit of setup that needs to go into setting up background post. Okay, the first thing is setting up your job queue category. What I did is I went and set up a sales post, so a background post for my sales documents, because that's what I want to go ahead and utilize background post for. And then in your sales and receivables setup in the nav client, you need to go into the background posting fast tab, and you need to activate post and print with the job queue. So as soon as you activate both of those, background post will be activated, and then you can go ahead and select your job queue category code that you set up, which will route it to a specific job queue, or you can leave that blank and it will just go ahead and utilize a job queue to post. Now, you can also notify on the success. So in the notifications window in the role center of the nav client, you can go ahead and have nav notify you on the success or failure of a post. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, either Mark or Cynthia can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it notifies you on failure no matter what. But if you want to notify for every single document that you're processing, you can select notify on success.
Yes, you are correct. In fact, what can frequently be done or is frequently done is early in the implementation of this, having notify on success turned on, because you want that comfort that every transaction has been successful. Once you're comfortable that job queue background posting is working as intended, you would uncheck this so that you're only being notified on failure.
Yeah. So, like for example, my company, each order processor bills about 100 sales orders a day. So maybe in the beginning they want to be notified that the job queue is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, but after a while getting 100 notifications a day may get a little cumbersome. So like Cynthia said, it's a great practice to start with it on, so people get comfortable with it, and shutting it off once they feel that background post is doing what it's supposed to do. And then we want to go ahead and set up our job queue entry. Okay, so sales post via the job queue runs via code unit number 88. Okay, you can go ahead and select your job queue category code, and that's pretty much it. And then you can go ahead and set the status to ready, and the job queue entry is created, and you can start using background post. Okay, so when you're on a sales document and you're completed with the work that needs to be done with it, a sales document or a purchasing document, this can be done on both. Once you're done editing the document, doing what you need to do, and you decide you're ready to go ahead and either post it or post and print it, you can go ahead and select one of those options. And once you select it, you're going to get an option, or the message that says the order number has been scheduled for posting, which means now it is handed off to the job queue to handle the posting routine. And once you close out of that, you'll go back to your nav client. You can move on with the next document that you need to create, or move on with another task for that matter. Now the question is, will your company background post? Now this does depend operationally on how your company processes its documents. Like for my company, we need to keep our sales orders open throughout the day, so we can't necessarily use background post, but it really is a great time saver for companies that do post your sales orders, per transaction. So, review your business processes, work with your partner, discuss it as an organization to see if background post would be beneficial to you. Before we move on to utilizing the job queue and more advanced methods, I want to go ahead and hand over the presentation for a second to Mark Brummel, and he's going to talk about the significant changes that were made starting in NAV 2017. So, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the cue. I was a little bit surprised. I was handling the questions while listening to you. So this presentation is done based on NAV 2016 and 2015 and 2013 are two work the same, but Microsoft decided to make some changes to NAV 2017 and again 2018 works the same as 2017. And the reason why Microsoft did the change is because of Microsoft Azure. If you want to host anything on Azure, you're not just buying a big server that stands still for a long time and then starts processing when you want it. You start using shared resources, and you pay. The billing model with Microsoft is per resource. And Microsoft did some testing on the software, and they found out that the job queue was actually using a lot of resources. And the reason for that is, if you look at the way that job queue is started in 2016, it's basically a loop that says while through do begin. So it's a never-ending loop until you stop the service tier, and then it just does something, and then it does a sleep for 10 seconds. For one of my customers, I had to change the way that the job queue works from running for every minute to every second, because we use the job queue for printing, and if you want to use the job queue for real printing, people don't want to wait a minute until the job queue is finished. And that didn't work really well on 2016, but it worked a lot better on 2017. What Microsoft did in 2017 is that they introduced a new system table which is called scheduled task. And the service tier hard-coded is looking at that table, and that table contains a processing code unit and a failure code unit. It also makes it easier to handle failures, and it's just a lot more relaxed on handling CPUs. So basically that's something we did at that customer, is we did a technical upgrade. If you want to leverage the job queue enhancements that Microsoft did with NAV 2017, you do not have to do a full upgrade. If you run 2015 or 2016, you can do a technical platform upgrade to 2017. The way you do that is you open your database in the 2017 Seaside environment, and then it will ask you, do you want to upgrade your database? You simply say yes, and then it says, please synchronize your schema, and that'll create the C# code which is necessary to run it, and then you just install the NAV 2017 Windows client everywhere, and you should be good to go. The only thing you have to do then is you have to import a couple of code units and pages from 2017, and then you should use the 2017 job queue enhancements in NAV 2016. A couple of other things that have been changed, as far as I know, but I know that we have a couple of smart people in the session today. But as far as I know, you can only have one job queue in 2017, while as in 2016 you could have the different job queues. But the job queue in 2017 is multi-threaded, and you can actually set up to have it run multiple jobs at the same time, or you can set it up to wait until a previous job is finished. Looking at my notes here, the job queue table is discontinued because that was the table that pointed to a specific service tier, and I think that is what I had on my notes, Chino. So you can continue.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate your insight. I know a lot of the changes in NAV 2017 and up are great changes, especially when it comes to the setup of the job queue, and two, actually the processing of the job queue. And I'm really excited to learn more about it. I want to go ahead and finish off the webinar with one last little section, and that's, I call it the job queue, the next level. The job queue is used for more than just running a single report. Okay, it can be used for several or many other business processes, redundant business processes, or time-consuming business processes. And what I did is I just took a couple key examples of how, when we upgraded to from NAV 2009 Classic Client to NAV 2016, how we utilized the job queue to save time. So I'm just going to share some of the personal examples that I have of how we're using the job queue on the next level. Okay. Utilizing code units. Now, utilizing code units, if you're an end user, you may need to get your developer or NAV administrator involved with this to develop the code units needed to run certain things like XML ports or reports with multiple parameters. So I just want to add that caveat end here. But we currently use it for importing data, exporting data, and reporting and emailing. I'm going to go into each one of those here. Starting off with importing data, what we do is our shipping system, what we utilize the job queue for is importing our tracking numbers back onto posted documents. Now, what's great about this is we were able to develop a code unit that can go call the shipping database, get the tracking numbers, and put them onto a posted document. But what's great about it is it runs frequently throughout the day. It's not a process that somebody has to initiate via a report and then it calls and imports them while locking up, well, not locking up, but utilizing their NAV client. Now we set up the job queue to call our shipping system to get tracking numbers and shipment information throughout the day, so the data is more readily available to our customer service. We also utilize it to import sales orders. So you can utilize code units and XML ports to create sales documents, sales orders, credit memos, etc. And even utilizing third-party apps or DLLs to push things to a external location. Okay, so what we can do is we have a job queue set up that calls a code unit that goes to an FTP site and pulls sales orders off of our website and imports them into Nav. So that's kind of the customization we have to be able to pull information from various sources and create documents with it. Exporting data, and the same thing that I said before works in reverse. We send customer data, customer information, as well as inventory information to our website. So using the job queue, we can run a code unit that calls an XML port that then generates the XML port and posts it on our FTP site, which our website can then grab. And all this is done throughout the day, and all of it is done in the background without any user intervention. The only time user intervention is needed is if I get a warning saying the job queue failed for some reason, which is very rare, which is really great.
So Gino, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the other or some of the other functionality that code unit adds is adding parameters or defining limits to what it is that you want to do, correct?
Correct. So for an example is if we are sending a customer sales data to our website, so they can access our website has a portion where they can view the invoices that they have and stuff like that, but we don't post the PDFs of our invoices on our website. It's just a web page that displays the invoice data. But we have a lot of active customers, and so sending an entire month of or an entire year or of invoice data to the website every single day, it just becomes redundant because you already have the previous day's invoicing on there. So you can set up the job queue or the code units and XML ports to assign parameters. So I only want to run this XML port for sales data with yesterday's work date, generate it and post it on the FTP site. So that's kind of the process that we went about. And the next, and where another area we use varying parameters for our reports is when we do automated reporting and emailing. Okay, yes, you can go ahead and set up reports to be created via the job queue on the Nav client, but you're very limited on the type of parameters you can use. You can't generate multiple reports, multiple of the same report with varying parameters. So for instance, customer communication, we send out PDF invoices weekly to all of our customers. Monthly statements at the end of the month. During our monthly statement process, the job queue takes over and emails our customer statements off to our customers. And then our sales representative communication. Our sales reps, we have over 60 sales reps across the United States and the world, and sometimes very frequently they need to get an update on their territory data and their commissions that they're earning or their sales dollars that they're earning. So we have 60 different reports with varying data, and but it's just it's the same report going to 60 different reps with a different posting date parameter every single day. So the job queue really does a great job utilizing code units and XML ports and reports to set the parameters for a single report being used multiple different ways. So in summary, I just want to close this out. Take some time to analyze your business processes to see how it's best to set up your NAS service tier. Setting it up on, like I said, at minimum, at least create a separate service tier on the same physical box your client service tier is on. Don't run the NAS service on the same level as your as your client tier. Best practices, well, not best practice, but in my opinion, separating them to the two on physical environments is the way to go based off of performance that I've seen, performance increases that I've seen. But we understand that some people just don't have the budget for that. So at least separating these service tiers is recommended. Utilize the 4-step job queue setup to activate your job queue. Take advantage of various methods to run your reports and tasks, and that's something you can start using immediately. You can activate the job queue and you can start scheduling reports and using background posts immediately. And then you can also talk to your partner about utilizing code units to run reports or XML ports with varying parameters as well. So I just want to take a moment and just say thank you for allowing me to speak to you all today. And I really hope you learned something, because this is something I'm very excited about, especially with the changes in 2017 that Mark mentioned earlier. But once again, thank you so much.
Gino, could you go back one slide for me?
Sure, definitely.
I just wanted to share with everybody, you can see here, we talked about suggested resources, they're listed, and you can see MSDN, MSDN, MSDN. There's a lot of information out there, but similarly to what Gino mentioned, where the order that you think you would set up job queues seems inside out if you read the documentation, so he showed you the order that he used. This information is really valuable, but sometimes it can be confusing. So if you have someone that you work with, a consultant, a partner, someone within your team that has some basic understanding of this, between this documentation and working through things, and if you have a sandbox development or test environment that you can take advantage of to try these things out, that's very helpful. But I just wanted to mention there is a lot of information out there. I'm not sure about 2017. Mark might be able to answer to that. And I think probably this is a good point to say thank you, Gino. What you shared I think was very, very helpful. And Mark, we'll kind of turn it over to you at this point.
Yep, thank you. And I wanted to just, first of all, of course, thank Cynthia and Gino for their efforts and their presentation. And Gino, I know that you're a first-time speaker, but amazing that you just managed to end exactly after 45 minutes, giving everybody 50 minutes to handle Q&A.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm going to open the questions window and allow people to type in questions if they have questions. I have been following up on the questions during Gino talking, so let me first see if we have any open questions. I have one here which is about 2017, and it says, in 2017 you can no longer specify a service instance to run the job queues on. Why is this so, and how does NAV decide on which service to run the task? So shall I handle this one, Gino?
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. So in 2017, if you go to the service administration window, you can actually set a flag if that service tier should handle requests from the job queue. The way I have used it at my customers is I have we went from 5 service tiers to 1 service tier, and that 1 service tier is handling all the job queue requests. As Gino mentioned in his presentation, it is strongly advised not to have the UI tier or the user tier handle any job queue responsibilities. So in your main service tier, you would switch that off, and then in the service tier that is a dedicated service tier for your job queue, you would switch it on. The system I'm talking about has about 25 jobs. It runs every second, and it's a logistical system. It's a trucking company, and it does its work without any issues. So the performance of JobQ in 2017 is so good that I don't think I would be surprised if you need 2 service tiers. If you enable 2 service tiers, they will just cherry pick whatever queue is is waiting to be processed. But again, as I said, I don't think you should expect to need more than one service tier in 2017. We have a question from Imran. Thanks for doing this. First of all, is there a way to notify the user or administrator if any job fails? If any job, I don't know what any job means. Maybe you can specify what you mean with that, Imran. I know
Mark,
that some people, yeah?
Mark, I'm sorry. From my perspective, if a job failed, let's say, I had something running overnight and it failed and I come in the morning, how would I know it failed?
Yeah. But isn't that what Gino explained, that you can actually notify on failure as well, or not?
That's for the background posting. You can note it automatically notifies you on fail. But what I have
not
had
the
done,
normal ones, yeah.
Yeah. So our job queue entries that we run, at least I'm going to speak for our organization how we use notification. If the job queue shuts off, there really is no way, at least that I know of, that you can be notified that it shut off unless you're using a network monitor to monitor services on a server machine. But if you want to know if a job fails during when the entry is running, I have had our developer create SMTP messages. So I just get an email to my help desk system saying that this job queue failed for this reason, and then I can go ahead and investigate it. So that's kind of how I don't think, from what I've seen, it's not built into Nav natively, but we've developed a way to still get notified if a job fails for a specific reason.
Yeah, and this is where 2017 kicks in, because in 2017 you can specify a failure code unit. So 2017 will first try and attempt to run the normal code unit, and if the normal code unit fails, it will automatically execute the failure code unit. The only thing it doesn't prevent you from having a crashed service tier, which honestly hardly ever happens. 2017 is insanely stable, but if you have a crashed service tier, you should Google on some solutions. I know people have written C# solutions for that, or you can use network monitoring tools, but I mean, that's of course worst case scenario, right? When your service tier actually crashes. We have a question. Do you need a different service tier per company in the database? And actually, while Gino was talking about failure and how to handle that, I actually quickly looked into 2017. And in 2017, the new system table that Microsoft has introduced has a field which is called company. So that table is shared across the databases, but I'm not sure if you need to set up a service tier for each company. Actually, it doesn't really matter that much, because in NAV 2017, one Windows user can log into Navision as many times as you want. So in older Navision days, you needed to have a different NAS user for each NAS, which was insanely expensive. If you had like 30, 40, 50 companies, it was just insanely expensive, and people actually created job queue scheduling tools for that. I know Waldo has one at eFacto. But in 2017, 2018, you can actually have a gazillion job queues with the same Windows user, and you only pay Microsoft for that single Windows user. So I hope that answers the question. Now I'm actually making a big mess out of the question window, guys, because I'm not following up which ones are answered. So hope some of you can sing a song while I'm going through this question window.
I was going to say that I will not do. We would like people to stay on for at least 6 more minutes.
Yeah, they can hear Rick humming in the back, so that's good.
Yeah, I hum because I don't know the words.
Exactly. I think, yeah, we had an interesting comment from Tobias, and the challenge that Tobias is facing, and maybe you have an opinion on that, Gino, is what if you have certain reports that you don't want people to schedule? Or how do you prevent somebody from scheduling a report that takes 5 hours to run, and then everything else that's supposed to run that night will not be executed?
Cynthia, I may toss this one over to you, but this sounds like something for permissions, correct? Or permission sets?
I think it's more a situation, if you remember, you referred to the ability to users ad hoc, instead of print or print to PDF, they can click on the schedule button. I am not aware of anything that would disallow somebody from scheduling something that has the potential of taking a long time to run. I guess that's a tough one. The only thing I could think of from an operational standpoint, you might want to say that you have some sort of internal process that people request to run reports. So you have someone who's controlling that. I'm not aware of a way for NAV to control that.
Yeah. We have a comment or a question from Dimitri Katsan. He says that I have noticed in 2017 there are no if-GUI allowed anymore around messages. Microsoft has been getting smarter at catching what you can and cannot do in NAV. Actually, if you put a message box in your code and the NAS or the job queue catches that message, it actually writes that message to the Windows event log. And I've actually used that to track issues and to make sure that we had some kind of logging which was independent from the standard NAV logging. So every message goes into the event log. So Microsoft has been getting smarter at those things. Dimitri also says that he made an extension that restarts the job queue after it's set on hold, so that sounds like a nice extension. I think we went through all the questions, but like I said, I'm moderating and answering questions at the same time, so if you feel like you have a question which is not answered yet, please type it again. Otherwise, I'm going to use this opportunity to close. Again, thanks a lot, Gino and Cynthia, for this webinar. You may have noticed as an audience that this was more of a functional webinar. Luke and I had a meeting last week about what we're going to do with the webinars in 2018, and we have the ambition of doing a technical webinar, a functional webinar, and a Seaside introduction webinar each month. So I think Gino did an excellent job in presenting, so did Cynthia. And if you feel like you want to share something, functional, warehouse management, manufacturing, service management, whatever you think is worth sharing, just send me an email, mark@navskills.com, and we'll make sure that you're listened to. So I don't have any updates in my questions window, so with that, I'm going to close the webinar and have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.